Welcome to the short series about my OS 5-inch gauge Stephenson'S rocket. This is part 3 and it's aptly called Problems and Solutions. The left-hand piston assembly does not go in and out of the cylinder like it's supposed to do, so now it's a process of elimination to find out why. The other side is working fine, so what's the difference between the two sides? Well, this one has a crosshead pump which is used to pump water into the boiler as the engine is running. The other side doesn't have a crosshead pump and the other side works and this one doesn't. Maybe it's because the crosshead pump is either out of line, or are the ball valves stuck, or is it just gummed up? I don't know. The way to find out is to dismantle it. Starting with removing the union and injecting some WD-40 into the pump body, which made no difference at all. At this side of the engine, it's really difficult to push the piston up and down in the cylinder. I wonder why. The other side's okay. You will notice though, it's very slowly getting free. At first it wouldn't move at all. But now as I turn the front wheels, the slide valves are moving and admitting and exhausting the compressed air from both sides, and at least this side that didn't move at all at first is starting to move very slowly. To be honest, at this stage I'm a bit puzzled with it. It's a very simple engine, why isn't it going? I think what I'll do is just check that the crosshead guides are not out of line. But no, it's not that. Even though I've slackened off the nuts on the crosshead guides, it's made no difference, so I assume that the crosshead guides are in line with the crosshead. As a last resort, I decided to smother the piston rod and the crosshead guides with some high quality lubricating oil to see if that made any difference, and guess what? It made no difference whatsoever, except that now one side of the engine is an oily mess. One common problem is a gland nut that's too tight and not quite on centre. So I slackened off this gland nut, it made no difference, so I tightened it back up again. After a while I did notice that this side was starting to move ever so slightly better, but at this rate I don't reckon my lifespan's long enough to see the end of this job. I know, I'll clean up the parts with a piece of scotch brite. I thought to myself, well, maybe the piston rod's slightly bent. It didn't look particularly well finished, so it won't go amiss cleaning it up with some scotch brite. So I did that for quite a while, and then I tried it with renewed optimism. And yes, it did make a slight difference, but I really don't think it was anything to do with the scotch brite. It was because the piston rod was being moved up and down by the action of the scotch brite. For some reason, this piston is sticking in the cylinder bore, so I have no choice now but to dismantle this side of the engine. And this is a very fiddly job. This is a very finely detailed model, and all the parts are very small. And as I probably mentioned, I do not like Allen cap head bolts on model steam engines. But for once I'm going to backtrack. I love Allen cap head bolts on this engine because it makes it very easy to dismantle it. The engine has a mixture of bolts. Some of them are hexagon bolts and some of them are Allen cap heads. All of the cylinder covers are held to the cylinder using proper hexagon bolts. Using Allen cap head bolts on cylinder covers is terrible. But there really are fine things, Allen cap head bolts, particularly when they're out of sight like underneath and very easy to get to with an Allen key. I found one of these very small screwdriver set socket driver things which fitted the bolts perfectly. One of the problems with these things is they are too long, so what I had to do was chop this one down to make it fit in the space. As usual, I used my bandsaw for this and then cleaned up the end with the 1-inch belt sander. So now it looks like this, but it fits in much smaller spaces. And in no time at all, this one, the last of the bolts, came away from the cylinder cover quite easily. I think it's time for some ultra-violence. I'm going to use a hammer. Not directly on the cylinder cover, I'm going to use this hammer to very gently tap a Stanley knife blade to separate the cylinder cover from the cylinder. Here we go, very gently indeed. Tap, 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 tap. It didn't move, so I admitted some air to the cylinder, and now watch. That's it, that's got rid of it. I don't think I meant to admit quite as much pressure into the cylinder, but anyway, the piston and the crosshead and the cylinder cover are now not attached to the cylinder itself. And here you can hear the valve events, as the slide valve admits air first at one end of the cylinder and then at the other end, so everything's okay there. The inside of the cylinder bore felt very sticky as I shoved my finger in there, and I really daren't go with the girlfriend joke at this point. The whole thing felt very gummed up, so here I'm using a piece of scotch brite to just clean the inside of the cylinder wall. There's a lot of really sticky, gooey, thick stuff. I think it's oil residue. You can see it quite clearly here. I removed the piston ring from the brass piston and cleaned that with some scotch brite as well. The piston is made from silicone rubber. This of course is WD-40, and what I'm doing with it is filling the lubricator tank. And then I'm going to undo the linkage to the drive arm so I can move the drive arm manually and hopefully inject some of this WD-40 and oil mixture up into the cylinders. But no matter how many times I moved the drive arm, the level of the liquid in the tank didn't drop, so the pump isn't working. I found it very convenient to use an Allen key hooked into the drive arm to move it. I'd been at this job for quite a few hours, and by now the ends of my fingers were starting to feel a bit sore. Believe it or not, this entire job, including putting it back together, which you haven't seen yet, took a day and a half. And was it worth it? Well, wait and see. That's it for this episode. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website. Click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you will find it very easy to find other videos that you may like to watch.